That's fine. I want to go fine. I love the view. I love that view. So peaceful and serene there. Okay, so let's see the head of the tomorrow. So again, we're going to be learning about extermination processes. Rabbi Yehuda holds that a steya ilan gets terribly damaged by these invaders, by these pests, and therefore you're even allowed to hire a regular exterminator and do the normal extermination, the professional extermination. But a sada lavan, which doesn't suffer such severe damage, that you can only do it shaloi kedarkei. Tanu Rabbanan, keitzad kedarkei. What is the professional method of killing these pests? Zok the Gemara, Zok the Brisa, choifer guma. You dig a little hole, v'toile ba matzuda, and you put a little net in it. So I don't think these things could be insects, because I don't know how a net would capture an insect. What it must be is you create like a little trap with a net, so the animal will fall into the hole and get trapped by the net. I'm not exactly sure how it works. Okay, when I think of a trap, I think it's a piece of plastic with glue on it, right? Or a spring that goes bam. But they had different types of traps. They had a hole with a little net on it. What would be the wrong way or the non-conventional means to kill these animals? Take a spit, a spike, and shove it into the ground. Of course, where you think they're underground, pound a stake into the ground, and then smash it down and move it around, and that should hopefully squash them. Rashi over here in the Ksaviyad gives a little bit more of a description. He says, so let's see chayfer guma. Chayfer guma means you dig a hole and you put a net there. So that's how it works. It's very similar to the way they trap raccoons or one exit point, then they put a one-way door.
David, do you also have Yosy broken up?
Yosy, yeah.
Time speed's moving just fine.
Time tree is what?
You see in the DOF video, Yosy and Chaim Tzvi are moving around. Oh, okay.
No, I plugged in. It wasn't plugged in. I was working with Wi-Fi. Now that it's plugged in, it should be much better.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I forgot. For
a second, there were two of you. There were two. You were on in both cameras.
I'm trying to minimize it, not maximize it. Okay, the Valtuk. You want to turn the light in the back? Yeah. So this way them to see you. Okay, so Zok Tehela Gemara. So the other option was Choifer Guma in Rashi Ksaviyad. That is Muniach Sham. The first option was you make a hole. Muniach Sham Matzuda Sheetu Der Chaguma and Matzuda. So you create one exit for them from their underground lair, and when they come out, they get trapped in your net. And the other unconventional way was Makabakardim ala Shmud. So you put a spike into the ground where they live, hammer it down with a mallet, so you get deep into the ground. The yasaguma, and they'll make a hole around it. You move it around. By moving it around, that's going to cause them to die or to disappear. I'm not sure exactly how the system.
It collapses their burrows, so they're forced to come up, so you can trap them. That's what the process.
Okay, development. Thank you very much. So that's the Shaloi Kedarkei. Tanya, and he brings down that it might not be Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Tanya, let's see the Tziyonim over here. Tanya, Reb Elazar ben Yosy, Reb Gamliel. So the Shayla who says this. Omer Kisha Amru Misad Alavan Shaloi Kedarkei. That they restricted extermination in a Sada Lavan, which doesn't suffer so much from these types of pests. So therefore, you can only do it to Shinu. Lo yomer elo b'stei lavan hasmucha la'ir. That's only if it's a stei lavan that's close to the city. Avo b'stei lavan hasmucha l'stei ilan. But if this stei lavan that has an infestation of these pests and is near a sada ilan where it could spread into the sada ilan and then it'll cause severe damage, then afilu kedarka, you're even allowed to exterminate normally in the stei lavan because a stitch in time saves 9. Because if you don't get rid of the pests from the stei lavan, they're going to spread to the stei ilan. That's why we take extermination very, very seriously. You're allowed to fix a hole in a wall on Moed, but it doesn't mean a proper fixing. It means you put boards there temporarily to block it up. How do you do it? Rabbi Yosef Omar, Hutza v'dafna. Hutza v'dafna is there's some posts that you take, and then you take like palm leaves and you sort of braid them around the posts, and that creates a makeshift wall. Rashi Hutza says anfe dekel tomorrow. Palm leaves, those aren't very strong. Those were used as the weaving things. And dafna or buyer, which is I guess more sturdy sticks. The oven geder mi dafna. You make the fence with dafna, which I guess the harder post. And the gadol oisam hutza dekel. You braid around them the palm branches to give it to spread out the sort of the anchors. So the harder wood this is sort of anchored in place, and then the softer branches create the screen in between. Okay, but Masnisatana, the Bryce we learned, Sor Betror, you pile up stones.
From Yosef's idea, I mean, he's not giving us the exact instructions. The idea behind the instructions is he's telling us the easiest way to make some type of a fence. That's what he wants.
He's probably telling you that that might be shot, or might be the maximum structure you're allowed to give it before it's too much. So there's another sheet that says, Sor, pile up rocks as if you're making like a stone wall, but then you talk with it. Don't cement them together. So it creates a temporary blockage, but it's not going to be a permanent until you actually cement it together. The only time we are restrict about how you can fix it is the koisel of a garden where you have things growing. Now you do want to protect it, but it's not like you have a serious security breach that you need to be careful about. But if it's the koisel to your actual yard, and in those days, and in most places, you get to the chotzer, and then for the chotzer, you go into your house. So that's a direct security breach. You're in danger, you're exposed to intruders. There it's boina kedaka. And Rashi says, koisel gina is the leka pseida, yisera, ilabenchi. Someone walks into your vegetable garden, nish geferlach. Aber koisel chotzer, boina kedaka, dika pseida yisera, ilaili v'gamli v'moinen. This is a direct access into your home that you're allowed to be much more careful with. And of course, you're allowed to build a proper fence, do whatever you need to do in a professional fashion. Let's bring a riot or prista that for your personal space, you're allowed to build properly. And for a gina, you're not allowed to build properly. Because it says in the Brisa, if there was a koisel that's goicha, Rashi says is shoicha v'notli, it's leaning over onto Rosh Hashanah. So it poses a danger to people in the Rosh Hashanah. Soiser uboyne kedarkoi, you're allowed to break it down and build it up properly. Mipnei hasakon. Zogt Rashi, soiser uboyne kedarkoi, dainu koisel chotzer. That's a koisel chotzer, and it says you're allowed to knock it down and build it up again. So we say, it's a right that you're allowed to build a normal wall if it's your house, if it's your chutzner. Zok Gemara, there you don't have a right Hasam kidikatani taima. The Brisa there gives a special reason. Mipnei asakana. There it's only allowed because otherwise it could endanger the people walking around in Rosh Hashanah. It could fall on them. It's dangerous. That's where they allow it. So you might ask, well, to prevent the danger, you only have to knock down the wall. Who said that you're allowed to build up the wall? That's weiter a right of Chisda that you're allowed to build up the wall. That's a kasha that you might want to ask. So I'm going to skip a couple of lines in the Gemara. because there's a line later on in the Gemara that some people say belong right over here. So I'm going to keep my finger on where we're up to, and I'm going to skip down to over here, where it says, Hasam Nami, Lister V'loi Livni. If it's not a right to a Chisda, it's only because of a sakana, then only breaking down the wall should be allowed, but not to rebuild it. If you're allowed to rebuild it, once again, you have a raya to a Chisda. So no, you don't have a right to a Chisda. Because if there's an existing wall that's leaning, then we'll let you knock it down and build it up. Because if we don't let you build it back up, you're not going to knock it down. But Reb Chisda is speaking in a case where you didn't have a leaning wall. You had no wall at all, it broke. There, you'd be allowed to build up a wall. So that's how some people learn this Gemara. So we started off trying to bring a raya to Reb Chisda from the Brisa, and then we refuted that it's not a raya. The Ikadamri, there was another angle that was presented that to start off with a kash on the Chisda. Toshma, so we make a deal. The Brisa says mipnei sakana. So mipnei sakana, only if there's a danger, only there are you allowed to build a wall. But shaloi mipnei sakana loy. But if it's just a regular breach of security, thank you so much, Monty, like a regular security issue, then it wouldn't be allowed. So let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says, mipnei sakana. The Brisa says you're allowed to build a mipnei sakana. So people walking by won't get hurt from the wall that might collapse on them. But if there's no special sakana here, you wouldn't be allowed to. So kachel Reb Chisda, this would be shver on Reb Chisda. The amar b'koshel chotzer boine kedarkei af al pi deleka sakana. Even though there's not an immediate danger, he still allows you to build a wall. Zokta Gemara tritz loy kachel Reb Chisda. It's not shver on Reb Chisda. So before I read Rashi, I have to read back into the Gemara. So the Gemara says leimatav yofted Reb Chisda, because from the Brisa it's mashma, you're only allowed to rebuild the wall if there's an imminent danger, and here there's no imminent danger. Reb Chisda can answer, Hasam soiser boina. There you need a sakana to allow you to break down an existing wall and to build it up. But a hacha boina v'loy soiser. I'm talking about building a wall without breaking it. To be soiser wall and build it, it's only a sakana. It's only if there's a sakana. But just to build a wall by itself, maybe you'd be allowed to build it even if it's not a sakana. A little bit schwer to understand that there is. So let's get into it. So Rashi tritz loy kashal Reb Chisda. The hard to Katan b'makam sakana. That the Brisa says you're only allowed to break down the wall b'makam sakana. Hainu disasar la k'shagoyche ubayna la shaper. If you break it down, that you're only allowed to break down because of a sakana. Haga the kamar Reb Chisda shaloi b'makam sakana bayna kadarka is kehisha surah kaida b'chem avaloi sasala b'moed. So Zok Rashi, if you have a leaning wall, you're not. It's not for sure going to fall down. You're not allowed to break it down only if it's an imminent danger. But the boina part, everybody agrees you're allowed to do. The soicher part you're not allowed to do unless there's an imminent danger. But the boina part, even the Brisa would agree to me that you're allowed to build up if you don't have a wall. Frak Gemara, Hasam Nami, they're also listener of. Now this line of the Gemara doesn't make any sense at all. That's why I mentioned earlier that there are those who say that this line belongs earlier. But here, Pashwa, what is Hasam Nami lister v'lelivni? Aren't we saying that the whole teretz is that to break it down you need a sakana, to build it up you need to build it up. Everybody agrees. Everybody agrees with Chisda. So what's the kash here? Hasam Nami lister v'lelivni. So there are those who learn that the kash is Hasam Nami lister v'lelivni. If the reason why you're allowed to build up the wall is not mipnei hasakana, like the Brisa says, which only describes why you're allowed to take down a wall, and the reason why you're allowed to build up a wall is because of Reb Chisda's svara, that you're always allowed to build up a wall because it's for your personal security. So list of the Brisa that tells you should say differently. It should say soiser kedarkai mipnei hasakana. Because you're allowed to make security in your house, and which is a completely different reason than the sakana. So if the reasoning for the boina is like a Chisda, then the Brisa shouldn't have lumped the reasoning, the explanation for the Seiser and the Boina as a Sakana. The Brisa should have separated it and explained why you're allowed to be Seiser, which is the Sakana, and why you're allowed to build. That's how the Mepharshim learn this line if it belongs over here.
What about a garden wall that's leaning into the Rishus Harabim? Could you be allowed to be Soiser?
Based on this Brisa of Sakana, you'd be allowed to, but you might not.
But you wouldn't be able to bonus. So couldn't this be coming about the garden wall?
Why can't you say that this Kaisel Hagoychel Rishus Harabim is speaking about a garden? How do you know B'chalal that it's speaking about
because you should be allowed to demolish it but not rebuild it.
But are you asking that? How do we know that the Brisa is speaking about?
Why don't we say this part is referring to that case? That because Rav Chizda said you can only rebuild the courtyard wall, you can't rebuild the garden wall, right? Because of security. But if you had a garden wall that was leaning into the Rishus Harabim, it was dangerous. You'd be allowed to take it down, but you wouldn't be allowed to rebuild it. Wouldn't that work? Right. So wouldn't this little shtickle that we don't know what to do with, wouldn't it apply to that case?
Yeah, but we were asking a kasha here. We're asking a kasha. Chisda is going to explain the Brisa that the Brisa says that you're allowed to be Soiser with Sakana. But Boina, you're allowed to be Boina even without a Sakana. Right?
Only for a courtyard wall.
So you want to say Hasam Nami listed in a different case, but that's not the case of the Brisa. You're right. In the case of Gina, maybe it would be the list of Livni. But we're speaking about the Brisa here that's speaking about a Kaisel HaChotzer. I thought you were asking, how do you know that the Brisa here is talking about a Kaisel HaChotzer? Maybe our Kaisel in our Brisa is a Kaisel Agina. And then it makes perfect sense to list of Livni. But I'm not sure. Let me look at the Gimel and Dal. Maybe the Girsa says Chotzer, but it doesn't. So I'm not even sure. That's a very good point. The whole kasha that we asked from Chisa from the Brisa was from this Brisa. How do we know that this is a Kaisel Chotzer and not a Kaisel Gina?
That is what I'm trying to.
It's a good question. I don't know. Even Rashi just says. Rashi says, oh, I know why. That's very good. That's very partial why. Because if it was a Kaisel Agina, you couldn't do it Kedarkai. You would have to build it with a Shinoi. So since the Brisa says Kaisel Soishavani Kedarkai, it must be speaking about the Kaisel of a Chotzer, not of a Gina, because the Gina has to be done with a little bit of a change. Mikaran, it says. You're only allowed to do like a makeshift type of protection. So the fact that it says Kedarkai, that's how we know for sure it must be speaking about a Chotzer. Okay, Gavaltik. Shkoy for bringing it up. Okay, so Zog to Gemara Baiter. Im Kain, Mimna Veloisoisa. You don't need to give a special reason for the boina based on what we're learning now. You could say that the sakana is also the reason why you're allowed to rebuild a wall. Because if you weren't allowed to rebuild a wall, then you wouldn't knock it down, you wouldn't remove the sakana. So the sakana not only justifies taking down the wall, the sakana also justifies putting up the wall, even without Rav Chisda. Amar Rabashi, morning. Rabashi says, Masnisin Namideka. Our Mishnah also supports Rav Chisda's halach. The Katan, it says in our Mishnah, Uveshvius boina kedarka. On Shemitah, you're allowed to build regularly, but not on the Moed. So the Hecha, what type of wall is the Mishnah talking about when the Mishnah says Uveshvius boina kedarka? Ilay the Chotzer, if it's speaking about the wall of a Chotzer, do I need to tell you that during the Shemitah year, you're allowed to rebuild the wall of your yard if it breaks? It has nothing to do with agriculture. Of course, you'd be allowed to rebuild a wall of your property if it broke on Shemitah. So if the Mishnah is trying to tell you a chiddush of Shvius Bnei Kedarkai, it must be a wall that has to do with your plants. And a lav de gina, it must be referring to the wall of a gina. And there, there's a chiddush by Shemitah that the afagav the mechse command the ovid netirusa leperi, even though it looks like you're trying to protect your payers from intruders, which you're not allowed to do on Shemitah, you're still allowed to build a wall. Shema mina. So you see that you would not be able to be boine kedarkoi, the wall of a gina on Moed. You're only allowed to do it on Shemitah. That's a Rashi. She says, allow begina ubishvias boine kedarkei. But on Chalamoid, ain't boine kedarkei, you would not be able to build a normal wall to protect your garden where things grow. You'd only be able to put up some type of makeshift system. Okay, so just to summarize what we learned is for your own personal security. Rav Chisda says, and it seems that everyone's moed, that you're allowed to build a proper wall if the wall of your personal courtyard was breached, but if the wall of your garden or field was breached, you're only allowed to temporarily close things up. You cannot build a permanent wall. If you have a leaning wall, you're supposed to take it down and then you can rebuild. Rav Meir says, so now we're changing gears and we're discussing another feature of Chalamoid. Rav Meir, Royin es hanegoyim lahakol. You're allowed to look at negoyim. A kohen is allowed to look at the nega that a person has if he's going to paskin that the fellow is tar. Rashi says, Royin es hanegoyim lahakol. Klaim roya kohen digatras b'moed litaher. Only if it's going to be tar. Avoy lahachmer. Shem roya kohen shu tamei. What if the kohen sees that the symptoms of the nega would render this person tamei? Eino emer klum. Better he shouldn't answer the shayla at all. Shematamoy, because if he's going to say tamei, nimtzo mitzayre b'moed, you're going to end up causing him tsar b'moed. Rechman nomer v'samachta b'chagecha. Now this is I'm sorry. Right, this is what's a little strict. If a guy doesn't say anything, it's also going to take away. It won't actually be matamim, but it's not exactly going to tickle him pink. Right. That's one of the svaras how people explain the next shita. You can't look at it at all because either way the cat's out of the bag. But the Gemara explains more that the kohen sees something, he's not allowed to hold back. He's got to say what he sees.
Even the mayor's wording is very strange. Royan, how are you supposed to know whether it's going to be good or not good in order to say Royan? Like, you can't tell him. You can only.
No, Rashi says that the kohen comes and looks at it. But if it's tamei, he keeps his mouth shut.
Yeah, well, Rashi doesn't explain, but he already saw it.
Right, but he didn't pass it on.
But he already saw it.
Doesn't matter if he.
Well, the mission says Royan only this way.
No, he
already looked
the
at it.
Chaim is asking. It shouldn't say Royan lahakel. It should say the oimim or poiskim lahakel. Why does it say Royan lahakel?
I know.
I guess you have to show it to first a Talmud Chacham who's like Yisrael.
Yeah.
He'll say, I think this is what he's going to say, and then you have to Google it first. After you Google it and you know what the Rov's going to say, then you can go to the Rov.
I know Rav Moshe Feinstein never played chess on Shabbos with anybody.
Because
He always
during the week he did.
No.
Rav Moshe had time to play chess.
Rav Moshe, I don't know, maybe during the war, maybe with the Russians before he came, maybe before he came to America, he wouldn't play chess because once he realized that he's always winning, it was either to falsely win, to falsely lose, which he didn't want
To let the opponent lose.
right?
To let the opponent win.
And he didn't want to do because that was sheker, or just to make the guy feel bad. So that's why he avoided playing chess with him. Maybe with his grandkids.
That is such a good idea. Every time my uncle wants to play chess and I'm not in the mood, I'll say, Rav Moshe was not to play chess because you know for sure you're going to lose.
Yeah,
I tried that with my son on basketball. And my son said, Tati, I don't think you need to worry. Okay.
Yossi, getting back to this, if the kohen is silent, so the guy can go to the base of Migdash and bring a korban when the likelihood is that he's tamei?
He's not tummy because it's not the actual symptom that makes him tummy.
The declaration, I mean, it's not the symptom. Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much crime you do. If you're a liberal and the DOJ doesn't pick up on it, you're an innocent man. See, we also do that.
Rabbi Kaplan used to say, but that we have a raya, that it's mutter to steal it, and we also to get caught. The whole raya, they only punish you if you get caught.
I'll tell you. Tanya, Rav Meir said, Royin as negoyim lahakel. You're allowed to look at the nega if you're mekel of a loy lahachma. Rabbi Yosy Omer, loy lahakel v'loy lahachma. You can't look at it at all. You know why? Shemata niskak loy lahakel. If you're going to engage the kohen to be mekel for you, then niskak loy af lahachma. And Rashi says, Kloimer me'achas shurei eyu kohen. Omer beinu tamei beinu tar. Once the kohen sees it, he has to say whether or not it's tamei or tar. And the Gemara brings rise some psukim. So stay away from the Kohen completely. Omer Rebbe said, Nirin Diver of Meir, I believe that it makes more sense to pass like a mayor that you're allowed to look at Negoyim is b'musker. And Rashi, by musker, you're allowed to look at it. So let's just first quickly review the process of Negoyim. If a nega sprouts on somebody, he shows it to the Kohen, and he's never condemned right away. First, he's locked up for 7 days for observation. And if after 7 days it doesn't spread and everything stays the same, he gets locked up for another 7 days. But if after the first 7 days there's additional features, either it grows or hairs grow in it, then he's condemned. But what if it doesn't change? Then he's locked up for observation for another 7 days. And at the end of those 7 days, if it didn't spread, he goes free. And if it spread, he's tummy. So what Rabbi is saying, near the Meir b'muskar, if you have a mitzayra that's in lockup, he's under observation, that's when we're going to look at him. And the Gemara on Amud Beis will explain the reasoning for everything. But it's more mistaber to pass like Rabbi Yosy if you have a condemned person. He's already in he was already a mitzayra. He's already saying Tami Yikra. He's already in the and now he thinks it got better. There we hold like Rabbi Yosy that you're not allowed to look at it at all. And we'll get to the reasoning behind it soon. Amarava, B'tahar, and this goes back to what David Zolty said, if you're tahar, meaning you never had a nega, and now a nega is sprouted on you, should you show it to a kohen? You surely should not show it to the kohen, because you could only lose. Right now you're tahar, like David said, you can bring a carbon still. So you only have to lose by showing it to the kohen. Everybody agrees, don't show that to the kohen.
What is it? Don't give a mitzvah say to show it to the kohen?
Yeah, but you're allowed to push it off. Okay. No day.
But how long are you allowed to push off a mitzvah say?
Till after Yom Tov. So Basker Rishon, if it's the first lockup, and what are the stakes in the first lockup? If after the first 7 days the Kohen says you're free, that'll make him happy. That's good news. So on that option, on that side, it's worthwhile. If he's not matire him, he will not be matame him more than he's tummy now. So worst case scenario is status quo. You might go free in Gansen. So therefore, the you could show it to him. So the Rishonim, of course, ask, what are you talking about? If at the end of the first week it spread or it grew a black hair, you're matame him. So there is a downside. So the Rishonim say that's very unlikely. The goyim are likely. That happening is very unlikely. So again, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the goyim, but after the first week to become tamei, the Rishonim say is very unlikely, and therefore the chances are either he'll be tahar, which is good news, or it won't be any worse. So there's no reason not to show it to the goyim.
Most people don't speak Lashon Hara.
Atazai. No, but we're saying even somebody who had a nega, it's very unlikely after the first week that it will become tamei. Maybe because even if someone spoke Lashon Hara and he got a warning sign, he's definitely not going to do it again while he's under observation. I hear. So Tamar keep pligi. So where is the machlokes between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Meir as to whether or not you should show to a kohen? The Hesker Sheni. During the second week, after the second week, should you show to the kohen? And there Rashi says, because there the stakes are high. He's going to have a tumah chamura if he's condemned. That's surely going to hurt him. So that's where there's a machlokes. And the machlokes is as follows. Mar Savar, Reb Meir holds, the Kohen Talya Milza, Tumah has nothing to do with the facts. Tumah has to do with the declaration of the Kohen. Tahar, Amalei Tahar, if the Kohen sees that the symptoms declare this person as Tahar, the Kohen will happily declare Tahar. The Tameh, and if he's Tameh, Shasik, he doesn't have to say anything at all. Umar Savar, Rabbi Yosy holds, that's not an option, because it says in the pasuk, L'taharoi or l'tamaiksid, meaning the Kohen has to paskin tahar or tamei. He can't withhold. And therefore, better he shouldn't look at it at all. Amar Mar. So let's go back to review what Rabbi said about whose psak he prefers. Amar Rabbi, Nirin divrei Rabbi Yosy b'muchlet. I think it's mistaber to say like Rabbi Yosy. If it's muchlet, The div Reb Meir b'musker. And the words of Reb Meir is b'musker. Frek the Gemara about Tanya Ipcha. We had another version quoting Rebbe saying exactly the opposite. That it's near in divrei Reb Meir b'muchlet and Reb Yosy b'musker. The Gemara Tanoi he aliba the Rebbe. It's a machlokes Tanoim as to what Rebbe held. And now we're going to uncover exactly what the svaras are for all these things. But let me ask you a question. Would you rather spend the evening hanging out with your wife, or would you rather spend the evening going to party with your buddies? What would you rather do? I don't think the women watch this channel, so you could answer this in confidence. I won't.
A loaded question.
I'd rather hang out and party with my wife.
Okay, so the Gemara doesn't give that option. Here. So let's talk to Gemara. So this is the machlokes. The machlokes is what a person would rather. Would a person rather hang out with his wife, or would a person rather party with his friends?
That's not how you ask. You ask, stay with your wife or party with the buddies.
Here.
That's why I said I'd rather party with my wife. My father came to Rabbi Nachman, he asked me that same question on a different situation. He said, Rabbi Nachman, should I buy an old new car or a new simple car? So Rabbi Nachman said, go buy an old simple car. That's how he put it.
Here. Okay, so Dr. Mar Savar, one man that held Tzavsa the Alma Adiflay, Umar Savar Tzavsa the Isha Adiflay. So now let's see what happens. So Rashi is going to tell us that when someone's a Mitzvah Muchlat, he's Michut Lamachana, and he's removed from being with his friends. But his wife is allowed to be with him when he's a Mitzvah Muchlat. His friends can't. After he becomes Tahar, he has to go through a 7-day process. During that 7-day process, he has to be purged from his wife. But he could hang out with his friends. So now you see how the psak of the kohen is going to impact whether or not he'll be able to hang out with his friends or hang out with his wife. So let's see what it says. If you all the person would rather be with his wife, that's why in the second lockup, the kohen is allowed to come check. Why? The imitai misamchay. If he's going to be mitar him, he's very, very happy because he becomes tar. Everybody wants to become tar. And even if the kohen is going to say you're tamei umachletle, and now he's a mitzvah muchlet, and therefore umashader lei chutz migimel machnois the less tzavsa the inchi the alma. So even if he's condemned after the 2 weeks and he has to go mechutz lamachna, and therefore he's cut off from all of his friends, he doesn't mind so much because afilu less leitzaira the is leitzavsa the ishtay. His wife could still be with him. Umuter hu beishtay lisyachet ima b'mechelutay. A mitzvah muchlet is allowed to be with his wife. So therefore, if it's the Hasker Sheni and he'd rather be with his wife, it makes sense to pass like a mayor that the Kohen could look at it. Why? Because there's no downside. If they say he's Torah, that's beautiful. He's back to normal. And even if he's Tameh, it's not so bad because he can still be with his wife. So according to the Shita who holds he'd rather be with his wife, then Rebbe holds that Rebbe Meir is more understandable by Muskar because the options are pretty good. But for Divrei Rebbe Yosy b'muchlet, but I'd rather not look if you're already talking about Mitzvah Muchlet. You know why? If you're Matar the fellow, which means now he can come back into Machane Yisrael and he can have association with his friends. Muchlet means he was already completely tummy and he was outside, so now he's getting healed. So if you're going to be Matar him, you know why? He didn't have a problem. It's late Tzara, the less late Tzapsa the Ishtay Dasur. After he's a full Mitzvah, during the Tahira process, during that period of time, he has to be separated from his wife. So that's not so geschmack for him. The Kiban the Matar le Michalutoi, mi boile le mimne Shevi Yemei Sfira. He has to count 7 days. Uvi Mei Sefiroi, and during those 7 days, Osir B'Tash Mishamita. Dichsiv v'yashav michutz la'ahaloi shivas yamim, and we dashin v'ahaloi zu ishtai. Dichsiv shuvu lachem la'aleichem. So oil refers to his wife. So if he's a matar muchlet, better don't show it to anybody because if you make him tar, he's not going to have to separate from his wife for a week.
doctor, but if you're negative, fine. But if you're positive, then you have to report to the public health.
That's right. That's right. Your mom's become so you and your whole family.
Right.
So to Gemara, Umar Savar, Tzaf to Damod. No. No. Umar Savar.
That's Shmiel's take on it. My take on it is that the shepherd also has to deal with two kinds of people. So that's why he gives 2 weeks Tohor and 2 weeks Tomei. For some people who like to be with
Here. Umar Savar, Tzaf to the Omod. And the Nusach that said that I hold like Rab Meir, the Rebbe said I like Rab Meir, by Matur Muchlat is the opposite, when he likes being with his friends. So high time the Omer Rebbe, near and Divrei Meir, but Muchlat, the Divrei Yosy b'Musker, Savar Tzaf, so the Alma Adafle. A person prefers to be able to be with his friends. And therefore, where Rabbi says, I agree with Reb Meir that the Kohen will look at a Mitzvah when he's completely Tamei. The Imitama, if he says you're still Tamei, that's not bad. He didn't make it any worse. And if you retire him, misamcha, you make him very happy. This like tafs of the alma. He's not going to be able to go back and be with his friends. Even though he's going to lose the company of his wife, tafs of the alma a person would much rather party with his friend than party with his wife. And therefore, by a musker, where there's a downside, he holds you shouldn't look at all. You shouldn't show it to the coin at all. Why? Dilma metamale. On the one hand, he might take Tomei and then he send out chus gimel machanois. But less letzav so the alma with Ireland. So there's a chance that he's going to lose association. While he's a muskar, he's allowed to be with his friends. When he's a muchlid, he can't. And therefore, he would pass like a bitch. So that's the two pshatim. So now at least we have a better understanding of why Rebbe would agree with someone by muchlid or by muskar. It all has to do with the situation and the options that might occur when the coin looks, if they'll be good for him or bad for him. So if they'll be good for him, Rebbe holds do it. If they might be bad for him, then Rebbe holds like Rebbe Yosy, don't get yourself into trouble.
Doesn't this tell the story of what kind of a wife he had and what kind of friend he had? I'm sure it's not.
I think it's telling you what got him to tzaras. Did he say lashon hara to his friends about his wife? Did he say lashon hara to his wife about his friends?
All right.
Okay. So to Gemara, remember the muchlet mutter b'tas m'shamita. But what you're saying for sure is that a mitzvah muchlet is mutter to his wife. Is that true? So tomorrow in, that's exactly the case. But Tanya, we learned the Yoshev mechutz lahalei shivas shamim. Sheyei also b'tas m'shamita. Vein aloi ela ishtoi shenemer leich emor lahem shuvu lachem laleich. So it says that there's going to be a time where the mitzvah is also. When is this time? Rabbi Yehuda Omer shivas yomim yisapru loy yimei svirai v'lo yimei chilutai. Rabbi Yehuda says that sure, a mitzvah is usher to his wife, but not when he's a mitzvah muchlat, when he's in the tahira process, when he's counting the 7 days. Rabbi Yehuda Omer zayin yimei svirai kal v'chomer l'mei chilutai. Rabbi Yehuda holds, in fact, that b'mei chilutai he is usher on his wife because it's a kal v'chomer. Madach zayin yimei svirai, which aren't as severe, he's already coming out. And he's asked to his wife, when he's completely condemned and completely tamei, for sure he should be asked to his wife. Danti lifnei Rebbe. I asked in front of Rebbe, teach me, Rebbe. We got a little bit of a problem. Yosim was Uziyo's child. When did he father that child? It must have been b'mei chilutai. Rashi says, Yosem lehayalu Uziyo el b'mei chilutai. Klaimar, when his aber ima de Yusam, the mother of Yosam, did not become pregnant from Uziyo, el b'mei chilutai de Uziyo, is while Uziyo was a mitzayra. Uziyo hayu mitzayra, v'lo nizkak leishte b'mei svirai, when he was counting the yemei tahira, getting out of the tzaras, there he wasn't nizkak to his wife. El b'mei chilutai. That's when he was nizkak to his wife. So it seems to indicate, in fact, that a mitzayra is mutter to his wife b'mei chilutai. Amar loy af ani kachamarti. I also agree with that. The mitzayra mutter b'tas m'shamita. The v'yoshev mechutz ha'aloi is not referring to mitzayra muchlet. It's b'mei svirai ksiv. So Zok the Gemara, the Maikim, what is the machlokes between the two Tanoim if bimei chalutai is well, a person is also to his wife? Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda Savar, Goli Rachmana bimei Svirai, the Kolshgen bimei chalutai. Rabbi Yosy ben Yehuda holds that the Torah tells us bimei Svirai that a person is also to his wife, and we can make a kavah chomer that bimei chalutai as well, that the Mitzvah is also to his wife. Umar Savar, and the first shita held, which is Rabbi Yehuda, said, my the gully, my the loy gully. The period of time where the Torah says beferish and person's also his wife, which is the Yemei Sfira, that's when it's usher. But the Torah didn't say anything specifically about Yemei Chaluta. And then there's a question. Lamaisa, we have a possible, we do have a Kavach right? Tosh was asked, yes, Makshin, Lama Ein Rebbe Derish Kavach Ha'adam Don Kavach Me'atzmai. We have a rule that you can make Kavach Chomer. Is this not a good Kavach Chomer? Madach b'mei Svira, he's usher to his wife. Surely b'mei Chilutoi. So Toshus Hashem yes shum pircha. Maybe there's a pircha to this kavul chaymer that we didn't think of. Maybe the whole concept is a chiddush of mitzvah, so you can't apply anything to anything else. Or maybe it says shivas yomim, so there's a specific miyut to exclude other periods of time from the isser to be with one's wife. So that's why there's a reason why he wouldn't make a kavul chaymer. So tomorrow, now we have David Zolter's kasha. Remember at the Bekoyin told you Milsa. So Rashi, now we're asking Bainler of Meir, Bainler of Yosy. There Meir Amr Behedja, Itamish Shasik. Rabbi Meir said Beferish. If the person is Tameh, the Kohen doesn't have to say anything. Rabbi Yosy Kamer ain't right in Klal. Rabbi Yosy said the Kohen has a right not to look. Mechlal Rabbi Yosy Saber, Eloi Boi, Loi Chazi Loi V'loi Tameh. So Rabbi Yosy must agree that he doesn't become Tameh just because he has that symptom. If the Kohen doesn't come and look, he's not going to be Tameh. So does everybody hold that it's totally in the Kohen? When it's seen, what does that mean? There's times where you could show it to the Kohen, there's times you don't show it to the Kohen. What does showing it to the Kohen have to do with anything? You can't amru, you see from here that it's totally in the Kohen looking at it. And therefore, imagine you have a chosin, and the Grove is standing up by Shever Brachas and saying, this chosin is such a tzaddik. He's so careful about the way he speaks. He never speaks Lashon Hara. Meanwhile, the chosin has a nega on his arm that he's concealing from his colleague because it would be so embarrassing in the middle of Shever Brachas that everyone should know that he has a nega. Here, the people speaking by Shever Brachas think what a tzaddik this guy is, and meanwhile, the guy is concealing a nega. So therefore, chosin should know by nega, noit zayin yimei hamishta. You don't have to show it to the Kohen. We can push it off. Loi uleveisai uluksusai. This doesn't only apply if there's a nega on him, but if there's a nega on his house or a nega on his beged, it would be the same thing. We don't condemn it. V'chein beregel. The same thing is on a yomtiv. Noisten loy shivas yimei regel divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So you could refrain from looking at it. Rabbi Yomer ain't it tzarech. I don't need a pasuk uhu herais boy to teach you that the Kohen doesn't have to look at it. I know it from a svara because it says by the nige batim the tziva Kohen ufinus habayis. Before the Kohen comes into mimitama the house, the Kohen says take everything out so that not everything will become tummy. Why should you have a loss of all your kalim? So it's a pasuk of the svara. If the Torah tells us, but the by nige batim imamtina loy l'dvar harishus. If by nigei batim to save your kalim, which aren't so serious, nevertheless, we stop the Kohen from going in to be metamed to save those things. Surely for Yom Tov, for the week of the Chassan Kala, surely there you would not allow the Kohen to condemn. So I don't need a pasuk with Yom Heira Ice Boy to tell you that you could hold back. It's a pasuk of the Torah. Oh, so the Gemara is going to end up saying that. Rashi imamtinu dvarashos. We know we could learn the betumah de gubuvei, not only a tumah in the house, but a tumah in your guf as well. Mamtin l'dvar rishus to midach. You could also wait for a davar rishus. Given the ashkechan, the betumah de gufei mamtinu l'dvar rishus. If you have a svara to say that for a davar rishus, you wouldn't show a nega on your body to the kohen. Kol shegein the mamtinu l'dvar mitzvah go in chasan uberega. So my binai, what's the difference if you learn it from the fact that we delay being metama house or from ubiyoim heira'is boy? Amar Abaye mashma is darsh nikibinayu. There's no halacha l'maisa difference. It's just merely a difference of how each one wanted to learn this halacha. But for Rava Amar davar harashos ikibinayu. No, Rava holds if you learn it from ubiyoim heira'is boy, then in a tumah shebaguf, if the neck is on your body, then only then it's only a dvar mitzvah that will push it off for. But for a davar harashos, we wouldn't push it off for. But a neck in your house will even push off for a davar harashos. So that's the machlokes.
On the house directly, you are increasing from the
Just on him.
zero.
I hear.
I
I hear. So let's see Rashi. Davar shus ikbanayu. Rabbi Yehuda the mafet mibiyoim herais boy. We can amru chasen v'regel dainu mitzvah mamtinu loy. Avol davar harishus ein mamtinu loy b'tumah dugufei. Maybe for a davar rishus you would not wait and push the coin off and come. For Rebbe Savar, the davar rishus not in mamtinu loy because you learn it out of the nigebatim or to davar rishus. The minul il the Rebbe Yalav tumah dugufei lahamtin loy b'tumah dugufei. Rabbi Yehuda mehasam loy gamina. Rabbi Yehuda holds you wouldn't be able to learn it from nigebatim. The chidushu nigebatim is a chidush. Rashi says to have a chidush u'mechidush lo yafinon. The chalhecha dik chidush ein lach davar boy el chidusha. So Rabbi Yehuda holds you wouldn't be able to learn it from the case of nigebatim. So here's a third sheet of what they're arguing about. They're arguing about that the first sheet who says it's from uviyoim heira'is boy disagrees with what Rebbe said because you couldn't learn it from nigebatim because nigebatim is a chiddush. Why is it a chiddush? The eitzim va'avonim ba'alma. A house is something that's not something that can be b'kabel tuma. Yet ba'alma lo metama v'acham metama. Nigebatim are tummy. The whole thing is a chiddush. Therefore, the fact that by nigebatim you can take the kalim out, you can't prove anything to a nege in your goof itself because it's a completely different concept. And let's stop here. We'll be mamshel tomorrow.
Nigebatim is also a headache because